friends. Welcome to the Recover Your Life podcast. My name is Bridgett, and I will be your host. Together, we are building a community of men and women who are learning to shift from a rule-based to a value-based approach and navigating faith, sexuality, and relationships. It's time to start living the life we long for. Let's dive in. Kristen, hello. Welcome to the Recover Your Life podcast. So glad for you to be here. We are in season 2, where we are focusing a lot of our conversations around healthy sexuality. And so excited that we got to connect online because you have spent 15 years as a sex educator, really equipping and empowering kids and parents to have good conversations about sex. So I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Bridgett. And thank you for what you're doing in this space. This is my favorite part of social media is networking and meeting other people who are working in this very specific space because it brings specific challenges, but also a lot of joy. And I find that most people in this space, as I'm sure you found, have a real passion for it.
Absolutely. So would love for our listeners just to hear a little bit of your story. Like you said, this is a big topic. This is something that's really heavy to carry. And so what got you into the line of sex education and what kind of sparked that fire that this is something that's really important to you to give your life to?
Yeah. I love that you say give your life to because I don't really think about it like that, but it is such a massive part of my life. And I am giving my, adult career to this field. But that I have total peace in that because the Lord drew me to sex ed. I have no real practical reason that I was drawn into sex ed other than that God put me in that space over and over and over again. And that's where my peace about this topic comes from. I grew up in a Christian family, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners did. And I love my family. They're amazing. All of them follow the Lord. However, we never talked about our bodies. We never talked about sexuality or gender, even really puberty. I did not discuss. And that continued into adulthood. And so when I was studying public health, and I love the field of public health, and I went into that field pretty missionally, wanting to serve communities, meet them where they are, which is a big aspect of public health, I was actually assigned to teach this class.
Cool.
And I thought that teaching human sexuality was going to be a huge mess. Like, how could I talk about this? I'm a Christian. I'm not supposed to talk about this. I don't even know how to. And my students really saw that. They noticed my discomfort and my hesitancy, I think, in that first semester, because a part of my collegiate experience and teaching experience in particular was that we got reviews of our teachers or we gave reviews. And so I had these reviews that said this girl's fine. She's all right. But also there's this aspect where I think she's a little bit uncomfortable. And even though that wasn't the primary review, it really hit me hard. And I began to pray about this job. Like, if you gave me this job, because I had been praying for a job and this pretty much fell into my lap. If you gave me this job, it wasn't some temptation from Satan, like I initially thought, then why is it good? Is there anything good about this topic? And it was like God was just there with me. And yes, this whole thing is good. I created this. Why did you think it was bad? Like, what gave you that impression? And I knew what gave me that impression once I started to think about it, just as you do and a lot of your listeners do, right? It's the silence, it's the shame, it's the purity culture. It's the awkward conversations in church or with a parent. But I also knew I needed to leave that in the past and let it go and move forward. And the Lord really propelled me forward each and every day as I was teaching. And my second semester reviews and experience was just black and white different. I loved talking about it. I was excited to talk about it. I was so ready. And I also was searching the scriptures more. And I had never really done that. I had people do it for me and pick out certain verses, and it became rule-based and legalistic in regards to sex. But I had never really explored God's design before. And so that was a good experience for me personally and spiritually, of course. And then after that, I tried to walk away from sex ed a few times to do other things in public health. And it was like, nope, I just kept getting opportunities to do it again and again and again. And I just loved it. I mean, I couldn't deny that it was really the best part of my job. And so even on the mission field, we were overseas for years. I wasn't planning on doing sex ed overseas. And yet people found out, you're a sex educator. Yes, I am. Can you talk to us? We don't know our bodies. We don't understand
Yeah.
like how this is supposed to feel, what's right, what's not right, what's immoral, what's not immoral, what does the Bible really say? And so that was just like another, okay, here we go again.
Mhm.
I'm doing this because the Christian community doesn't have it,
Yeah.
or they don't have it in mass. And so God called me again and again, and he called me to Sex Ed Reclaimed. He totally planted the
Mhm.
vision for that. And I'm
Mhm.
really, really thankful. I couldn't have thought of it on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And I love for your story that you have taught sex ed in so many different contexts. I think that's really important with the curriculum, the beautiful curriculum that you've created, is that you have the background. It's not like you taught sex ed to 6 kids in a Sunday school class one time. Like
Right.
you have years of experience with all different
Mhm.
ages and stages and places. And so yeah, I'm just really grateful to have your expertise in this area today. And so I put questions out on Instagram and I reached out to all my parenting friends. I'm not a parent yet, but have some incredible mini BFFs in my life. And so this is also an
Mhm.
important conversation for me. And so today we're going to spend some time answering parents' top questions about talking to kids about sex. How does that sound?
Sounds great. Sounds like my job. And I love
Love
it.
it, love it. Okay, so the first question is, how old do we introduce kids to the concept of sex?
Great question. So this is a really common question.
Mhm.
And millennial parents who are much of the parenting generation or Gen X have hesitancy towards this. And sometimes there's fear behind this question.
Mm,
There's this common myth that is, if I talk about something, kids will do it. And it's
yeah.
just not true. It is
Mm,
not true. What leads kids to do things is curiosity.
mhm.
Curiosity is God given and it's a good thing. But that is the whole premise of why we talk to our kids about this topic, because they
Yeah.
are going to be curious if they're not already. And we want to show them that we're the safe space for that conversation
Mhm.
and that we know what we're talking about. Even if we don't, like we are the person that they can come to, or we can say, I don't know, and do our research and go back and answer them. But
Mhm.
that's the foundation for answering kids' questions and having conversations with kids.
Yeah.
There's also a myth that the talk or talking about sex needs to be about the literal action of a man and woman having sex
Mhm.
or various types of sex or
Yeah.
different partners. And that's not true. The
Mhm.
conversation about sex is so much bigger than that. It
Mhm.
does include your body. It does include puberty. It does include sexuality and gender and how God designed us. It does include, marriage and relationships, but it includes healthy relationships. How do we date in a healthy way as
Yeah.
young Christians, as young believers? And what are red flags? What do
Mhm.
we look for that's just not okay? And so many young people accept as they go on because no one's really discussing healthy relationships with them.
Mhm.
And so I always recommend parents start talking to their kids at 2 or 3, age 2 or 3. And
Great.
again, that's not, hey, I'm explaining what sex is to you. Absolutely not. Of course not. We know that that doesn't make sense, right?
Mhm.
But it is explaining as you wash them or as they take a bath or as you change their diaper, hey, I'm changing your diaper right now. God made your body. Your body is so good. He loves you. This is the vagina.
Mhm.
Boys have penises, right? This is
Yeah.
your penis. And so you get comfortable when they're super young and they're not
Mm,
with shame yet or
yeah.
sensing embarrassment and shame as much as older kids are.
Yeah.
You yourself get comfortable with using the correct words, calling things what they are, making sure that they know those things are good. There's nothing
Mhm.
inherently bad about them. And
Yeah.
then even as they age just a little bit, by the time my daughter was 3 and 4, she knew nobody should be asking you to see this part of your body. Nobody
Mhm.
should be touching it.
Yeah.
There should never be, you should never be removing clothes. She liked to play make believe and she liked to play dress up. She still likes to play dress up.
Yeah.
And I communicated with her, hey, you can play dress up at your friends' houses, but you don't take your clothes off. You still leave them on. And if you really have to wear these dress believe or makeup, clothes, then you change in the bathroom.
Mm,
Because this is private and this is
mhm.
special. And so just affirming that their body is good is really a good way to start the conversation about sex. You're not
Yeah.
talking about the action, but you are talking about sexual parts of their body, which were made by the Lord.
Mhm.
And that creates a really good building block for the future. Now,
Mhm.
if a parent has never done that before or never affirmed or recognized these parts of their body, they can still start now. And they can even say, hey, we've never talked about this before, but I really want you to know, in order to be safe, XYZ, right? And continue from there. So recognizing, hey, we haven't done this, but I want to, and it's actually important.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I just had a parent email me this week, I think it was, and she's a grandparent. And so her kids are in their 30s and 40s. And she said, I never talked to my kids, but I heard you on a podcast and I want to. How do I start?
That's
and
amazing.
I'm like, that's great. You know what? Because she's going to start talking to her daughters, in this case, about healthy sexuality. And that's great, because it will pass on down to her grandkids, and she can recognize a place where she had a gap. And that's totally normal. Most parents and grandparents were not effectively talking about this, but it's time to change.
Yeah, that's so good. And so the follow-up question to that is, when kids are a little older and they are asking more specific questions, like the iconic "where do babies come from?"
Yeah.
Which, right, we know in cultural that, that is like, oh, wait till your dad gets home, or wait till your mom gets home, or, kind of like pass it off to the other parent. When kids are at that stage where we go, okay, we're not old, like that there is, I think something that feels really important to say is, like, privacy is not secrecy. And so that we can have privacy around conversations around sexuality without enforcing a shame-based secret of sexuality, but also honoring, these are conversations that we have with mom and dad, that we're not, screaming at the top of our lungs in, Walmart or whatever it is. So when kids are getting a little more curious, what's kind of that beginning conversation about the actual where babies come from?
So I actually posted this on my Instagram.
Okay.
So if you're on social media, you can follow Sex Ed Reclaimed and see a reel where I had this actual conversation with my daughter, who is 3 at the time. Okay. She was 3. So she, in this example, she was looking at a magnet on her fridge, a picture, and her daddy was holding her. And she said, where did I come from? And the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure you know what they're asking.
Yeah.
For a poor example, there was I'll give you a poor and a good one. There was a parent whose son was 8, and he said, what sex? That's it. Just out of the blue. Like, he was working on a worksheet thing, and what sex? And it went into the full on explanation of the penetrative act of sex. Okay. Which I wouldn't recommend. And he then, at the end of that, looking completely shocked, said, so do I circle M or F? So in that situation, this little boy just needed to know what his sex was, and he wasn't aware of, he was doing this worksheet alone.
Poor nugget.
And so always, and then here's a short good one. There was a mom who came up to me recently she said her son was in the car and he said, what are boobies? And before she jumped into that, she said, what do you mean? A very simple way to start. What do you mean? Or where did you hear that from? With a positive tone of voice. That's good. And stuff. Where did you hear that? Where did you hear that from? And he said, somebody was talking about booby traps. Okay. So that's a very different conversation than boobies, right? So always ask your child what they mean with a light, if possible, positive tone of voice. What do you mean? And so in this reel on my Instagram, I do ask her that. Well, she wanted to know literally where she came from. This was the where do babies come from? Yeah. And so I told her, I said, babies come from a sperm, which boys have inside their body. It's like an ingredient, and an egg, which girls have inside their body. It's like an ingredient. And when those two meet, they create a baby. And she said, okay, and kind of moved on. And then she asked, but how did I get out here? Like, she knew babies develop in the uterus. She already knew that. And I said, well, you're born through the vagina. You come out of the vagina. And she goes, oh, was that ouchies? And I said, yeah, it was. And that was it. And then she went off. No shame, no awkwardness. Whereas in juxtaposition to that, I had a girl once who was a 7th grader. And I was explaining that very concept, sperm and egg, but right at a higher level, because this was in middle school. This was at a school. I was not a Christian teacher like you alluded to earlier. I taught in many different settings. So I was a Christian, but I wasn't allowed to bring the gospel into the situation.
Yeah.
But I'm explaining where babies come from and getting to that design without explicitly saying it. And this girl just starts crying in the back. And I ask her, quietly, privately, like, are you okay? What's going on? Well, she really thought babies came from storks, that they really did deliver them. And she was very embarrassed that her whole class seemed to understand that, yeah, of course, babies come from sperm and an egg. And when they meet, there's a
Wow.
baby, it comes from the act of sex. She was very embarrassed, but not so much that as it was that she was actually a bit angry at her parents.
Yeah.
She knew other people's parents, and that's not necessarily the case that they had actually told all these kids, but she figured their parents had told them, and she hadn't been true. And so she was quite angry. And that was just such a picture for me of like, wow, kids want to trust their parents. They naturally do. But when we lie to them, even if it's just silly little metaphors and myths, that creates confusion. And so starting with like, what do you mean? Or where did you hear that? And starting step by step, sperm and an egg. And then some kids do go on to say, well, how does the sperm get in the woman's body?
Yeah.
The man puts it there. Well, how? Well, it actually leaves the penis and it goes inside the vagina in a special act called sex, which we believe that God gave just for marriage, just for couples who love each other. Yeah, they might be a bit surprised at that. They might feel comfortable, and you can affirm whatever their feelings are. Oh, it's totally normal to feel that way. That's how I used to feel. Yes, I get what I get how you feel, but it's coming from you. And that's key, because when it comes from some kid in their class or from porn or from TikTok, it's a whole different start to their journey. And it also tells them that you knew that, but like they've learned it here. So this is the place they're going to keep returning to.
Yeah. That's so great. And the being able to meet questions as they come instead of having it be this elusive, oh, I'll tell you when you're older. Just trying to think of like things that we commonly hear in culture of like your other parent will talk to you about that, or wait till you're older, or you don't need to know that right now. Instead of answering the curiosity, because we really do want to bless. I think one of the challenges that I see with adults in general, parents or non-parent, leaders, teachers, babysitters, aunts, uncles, whatever, is this story actually invites us back into our own shame. When we are presented with children that have curiosity, we actually are invited back into the blessing of our own curiosity, or the ways that our curiosity was shamed in our own story, and the way that we were not parented and did not have answers and were met with all these and all of those emotions come back up. I think that's something really important to know, is that you are flooded, because when your 4-year-old asks questions, that when you were a 4-year-old and asked questions and didn't get answered, your body still remembers what that felt like. And so I do just want to honor that for parents, is it's okay that this is awkward for you too. And instead of using it as oh, you're doing it wrong or you're not a good parent, like what if we viewed it as an invitation to say, this is an invitation for you to get more healing, more wholeness in your own sexual story, in a way that honors where you're at in your journey.
I love that. I love inviting them into understanding their own journey. And I highly recommend doing that as a part of raising your kids, looking into what was I told or not told, and what did that teach me? And what you're saying, Bridgett, reminds me for some reason of the garden. Like Eve went to this tree and became curious. And she became curious ultimately because Satan was lying to her, right? He was twisting the truth. But she actually could have asked God, right? He was present with them. She could have said, wait, God, this snake is telling me this, but what did you say again? Can you remind me? Can I, she could have looked to him, and she didn't. Her curiosity was and is our curse now, but it could have been this really beautiful moment of her going to the Lord. And I think that's kind of the opportunity that presents itself with kids. Their curiosity can lead them to cursed places that will lie to them and whisper untruths and twist God's beautiful, good design. Or their curiosity could lead them to us. And the reason it would lead them to us is because we've already made it plain and clear that they can come to us. And we've been a welcoming place for them, a loving place for that.
Yeah, that's so great. Love it. Okay. Questions about if I talk to my kid about pornography, will they go find it?
Yes, this is a very common question. So my short answer to this is no. Now, I want to say that with a caveat, I cannot guarantee that no child anywhere would ever look
Mm-hmm.
for something after learning about it, right? But this is not the common reaction for most kids.
Mm-hmm.
The most common reaction when kids learn about something is to simply keep listening to you or to keep learning from you or to go to you for questions or to ponder it for a while, then return.
Yep.
Um, they're not going to, oh, I heard the word porn from my parents and I'm going to go look into it. However, they hear the word porn on the school bus, and they have no
Yeah.
expounding of what that word means. Well, then that can actually drive them
Mm-hmm.
to a place that isn't good if they know that they can't go to you.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard, and this is crazy, but sex ed, you hear all kinds of crazy stuff. I have heard multiple families whose kids, they didn't talk to their kids about porn.
Mm-hmm.
And their kids became teenagers. They still hadn't ever talked to them about porn.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is multiple families. So separate families, not
Yeah.
connected at all. And their kid had the Action Bible, which is a very common Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I guess somewhere in that, I've never looked at it myself, there's a sidebar that says something about porn.
Okay.
And this person's addiction to porn, but how they became free through the mercy and grace of Jesus or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
And each of these families, because their kids didn't know what it was, they saw it in the Bible, and went and looked it up online after that. And
Yeah.
all of them began addiction there.
Cool.
And that sucks, right? Like that just stinks to hear so much.
Mhm.
But what was the reason? Was it just because they read the word porn? No, it was because they had never heard about it before. And
Yeah.
so, of course, they went to Google. And of course, that brought up actual porn. And so
Mhm.
when you start the conversation, it's very different than, some other source. Even
Mhm.
seemingly this sidebar in a Bible, which should be a good thing, but they don't know what it is.
Mhm.
So you want to be the place that they hear it from, and you want to be very clear about how evil it is. And that's
Mhm.
not to shame them as
Mhm.
people. It's to talk about the reality of porn, which is that it consumes and misuses and abuses people. And it also gives us wrong, false ideas about sex.
Yeah.
And so it puts you in control. Like you're in the driver's
Mhm.
seat then if you get to have the conversation rather than some other source.
Yeah.
But no, it doesn't turn them to go start viewing pornography, especially when you're clear about what it does to the
Mhm.
person.
Yeah. One of my favorite memories of just having conversations about porn with young boys, I was at the hospital one day when I was pastoring, and I was at the hospital one day and I was going to pray with somebody for like free surgery.
Mm.
And a really sexually disturbing scene came on. It was like someone being violated and attacked, and like it was just so bad. And I panicked of like, I can't figure out how to shut. There's maybe like 2 or 3 other people in the waiting room. And I was like, I can't figure out how to shut the TV off. So I like went to find a remote. I went to like try to find the button on it. And
Yeah.
I went and went to the nurse's station or whatever, and I was like, excuse me, there is some like really graphic material on the TV right now that is super inappropriate. Can you please shut the TV off? But I was just like so heightened, so flooded. I felt sick to my stomach. Like I even can feel talking about, like I feel tingly in my arms. Like I just felt so gross.
Yeah.
I call that being slimed, where you accidentally see violating graphic content that you did not mean to see. You're just like, oh, I got slimed by that. And so I came back to my friend's house. I was having dinner with them, and I was like, this is a really great. And I said, I had something really sad happen to me today. I was at the hospital visiting with somebody, and I saw something on the screen that made my belly feel really sick, and I felt really scared, and I felt really unsafe. They didn't have clothes on, and the man was being very unkind, and I felt really, really scared. And I didn't know what to do, so I went and asked for help. But I still kind of feel tingly. So I told mom about it because mom is my best friend. And whenever I have those types of experiences, I don't want to feel like I have to process that by myself. So I always tell mom, because she's my friend and she's a grown up in my life that I trust, that I saw that, because I didn't feel good about it. And it was just like, ooh, gross. Like, that's sad. Like, I don't even remember what their questions were, but I just wanted them to have an experience that, like, adults in their life understand them, and to also explain the somatic experience of when we see unsafe content, our bodies do respond, and it's good that our bodies respond and go, ooh, I don't feel good about this.
Right.
And so again, it was maybe like a 3-minute conversation. I didn't even go into the whole like theology of pornography. I didn't even use that word. I just went and I saw something on the screen and I did not feel safe and my body did not feel good and I got help.
Yeah, that's a great response. Sounds like you did that really well with that group of boys.
Yes, I have them a lot. Had many years with them, and so we had lots of conversations. So yeah, I want to just create the humanity for adults that it's okay to like see something and to share what happens for you, right? I think about in Nashville, there's a billboard of these like cowboy strippers, something show. And I'm gut punched every time I see it. Like every time I see it, I just feel this deep, deep, deep compassion. I was just like, oh, these young boys that have grown up to be men that violate their bodies. Like I feel such deep grief about it. And every time I see the billboard, I just say, oh, I bless their glory. Every single time. And sometimes I have kids in the car when that is happening. And, so just being able to be aware of it can be a small conversation, but also be impactable, I guess is the word of encouragement I have for grownups is it's okay for kids to see you uncomfortable when you see something that violates your own sexual ethic or sexual value.
Yeah. And I think you're also getting at it's okay to share a little bit of your story, like as it's appropriate.
Yeah.
To say, when I first saw, I felt extremely uncomfortable. Yeah. My somatic response was this.
Yeah.
My physical response was this, because it shows your humanity. And a lot of us grow up thinking our parents are like untouchable, which is cute and sweet. And then we get a little bit older. Maybe they are. But this shows that no, you experienced that too. And it wasn't okay then, and it's still not okay. But you've also recognized why, and you can share that with them. So yeah.
That's great. Love it. Okay, some more specific questions around explaining wet dreams and masturbation to children, giving them language for what that is, and how do we navigate those conversations?
Yeah. So I'm big on things being age appropriate. And that's where it gets tricky for a lot of parents and adults, because they don't know when things are age appropriate necessarily, or what's recommended, which is a big part of the reason I created the curriculum I created, is to show you clearly what's age appropriate. So for example, in my 3 to 6-year-old curriculum and in my 7 to 10-year-old curriculum, when I talk about touching our bodies, I talk about germs, especially with the youngers, the littles. I talk about how we're not putting our hands in our pants, right? So just appropriate settings. Like we don't do this. We don't, those are sensitive areas. We don't want to get sick or hurt those areas. We need to be clean. This is why we don't put our hands in our pants especially while we're eating or at somebody's house or outside of the bathroom. So I really focus on germs with littles and recognize that whenever kids are touching themselves at that age, it's not like a masturbatory thing. It's not this desire to orgasm and experience sexual feelings. It's just they're sensual in their body and there's nerve endings and it feels good, but they're not connecting it to a sexual connection. Yeah. And so often I'll have parents say like, my 3-year-old or my 2-year-old is already touching themselves and I'm all worried, and it'll run its course. Don't worry about it. But do articulate that, hey, I don't want you to touch that part of your body outside of your room or, outside of your bedroom. And they grow out of it. But as you get older, the idea of masturbation really comes into play. And I do think it's really important for parents to talk to their kids about that and to be clear about that topic. In my curriculum, I do discuss how masturbation is usually paired with sexual fantasy and pornography and erotica, and how that ultimately those things do not ultimately set us up for a healthy sex life because they're very self-focused. And that's not how God created the act of sex to be. However, I will also recognize that Christians have all sorts of viewpoints on masturbation, and they might want to express those views with their kids as they age. And I understand that and accept that. It's just that in my curriculum, I do talk about how it's usually paired with unhealthy sources of excitement, and how those can play out in their future marriages if they get married, or even in their single life in ways that aren't appropriate. So don't shy away from it. It's important. It's one of the, I think, initial parts of puberty that many people experience. Recognize that God created nerve endings. He created sex to be pleasurable, created our bodies to feel good. But I do believe that there's a context for that. And so I think it's important for parents to look into, like, what do I believe about this? What do I think God says about this? And maybe do some research for themselves too, and for their own growing and learning, but not to avoid it. Don't avoid it.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that is good. And the whole conversations around sexuality in your home, the goal is for you to get connected to why you believe what you believe, and what is your value in your home, and how you want to change how you want to educate your children. And that is okay if it's different from your neighbor or your sister or whoever it is. I think that's really important to say, what happens for us, this is our sexual ethic. Is it something that we want to continue to teach? Was it helpful? I think that's important to say, like, hey, we're what we were taught, was that helpful to the way that we engage with our own sexuality as a human, but then also in the context of our marriage connection? Like, is this something that we want to keep teaching? Does this set us up for success? And then, like you said, reaching out for resources that can and engage those conversations for you to help have a better framework. Curious about, like, again, setting our kids up to understand that I was having a conversation with someone, and they were talking about like remembering wet dreams, and how they would go to their parents and say, "Oh, mommy, I don't feel good," because there was no other language. And then the parents like, "Oh, well, just go back to bed. You're fine." And it was like, I don't know how to describe the feeling that I have in my body. I just know I don't feel good. And so typically this conversation has been a male dominant, like wet dream, nocturnal emission conversation, but women also orgasm in their sleep. And so how do we explain, I guess I'm curious, what age is that an important conversation / what does that look like to set it up? Just say, oh, sometimes, God designed our bodies to process. I don't even know how to have that conversation.
Right. Yeah, it's tricky for sure. I think before puberty, like when the body is going to experience a different surge of hormones and it's going to start changing, you need to discuss it. Because if you do it before, and I've been saying this, but if you do it before the world gets to it and culture gets to it and friends get to it, it's extremely impactful for that child and for your relationship with them and continued conversations about the topic. So before puberty, you might acknowledge, and some people prefer, like, the father figure to talk to the son, right? A dad and a son, or when it comes to periods, a mom and a daughter. And that's not to say that the other sex person can't, or that they shouldn't be involved. Like, that's totally up to you and your family. But of course, women understand periods differently than men do. Like, we've experienced them. And similarly to specifically a wet dream for a little boy.
Yeah.
So, and you might talk about this as a family. You might be your kids might be close enough in age, or you have that kind of relationship. Every family is unique in that. But making sure that you make the space for the conversation to say, hey, this is I want you to know about something that starts to happen to your body as you get older. I'm not sure it's happened to you or not, but it's good to be prepared. And that's the same way you would approach something like a period. Is, hey, I need to tell you about this thing that's going to happen to your body. And it's not to scare you. It's not to make you feel weird, although I understand if you feel that way. It's to prepare you for how your body is changing. And your body changing is a good thing. It's the way God made it. It's the way that we grow. All adults have been through puberty. Like, normalize the experience of periods, wet dreams, puberty, because we've all gone through it. And it's helpful for kids to look around and recognize, oh yeah, all of these adults have done this, and like, they're okay. They made it through, because puberty can feel extremely difficult and challenging. So I would say make an intentional space to touch on that, and to say, these are dreams you have at night. This is how the body responds. We can't always control our dreams and what happens at night, but we can certainly pray about it. We can give it to the Lord. If we wake up uncomfortable, we can talk to him about it. He knows, and he's not embarrassed of us or ashamed of us. He knows this is how the body changes, and remember that your body is good. But I've talked to countless boys who the first time they heard about masturbation, and girls for that matter, was from a peer. And it usually wasn't clear. It wasn't fact-based. It maybe didn't have any values woven in with it. Or if it did, they were really, really negative, to the point that it made people feel ashamed of themselves. And so controlling the conversation is a great tool. And hopefully your listeners are getting that concept as we've been talking. But you get to talk to them about this, and acknowledge that it's a normal part of puberty, and that we can pray about it. We can talk to our adults about it, and we can have discussions. And like, your dad remembers, or I remember my first period, or whatever, and really affirming their feelings in that. But I wouldn't say there's like a cookie cutter, you need to use these words, because it depends on when you're having the conversation, how old the child is, your relationship with them, and if you want to weave in any of your own feelings or experiences, etc. But it's certainly easier to do if you've already been through bodily changes.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned periods. That was one question that came in from a mom of sons. She's like, is it appropriate for me to be talking about periods with my sons?
Yes, 100%. People always ask if I separate genders in my curriculum. Do I do a boy curriculum and a girl curriculum? Absolutely not. I really think all boys and girls need to learn the same stuff. Why? I think it's embarrassing how many adult men don't understand female anatomy. I have another reel about this, by the way, where there's a woman, and I don't know who she is, but she's going around asking guys, what's a menstrual cycle? Have you seen it? Did you watch this?
Yes.
Yes. Or like, what's the, what she's pointing to an anatomical picture, what's this? What's this? And I mean, grown men do not know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they specifically highlighted the guys who were unaware, but there was a woman in it too, who was a biology teacher, and she got the answers wrong. So it was just all around embarrassing for humanity. Anywho, so it's important for boys to learn about the female body, and they don't need to like other women to the point that they don't understand them at all. Like, that already happens enough in our fallen world. Let's help our sons and daughters understand how the other person's body works in very factual terms, in very scientific, anatomically correct terms. This is this, this is this, this is what it does. So I do not separate kids, because unless somebody, a school is really recommending it, because there's a lot of immaturity in the class or something. But and it's okay. Like, I can do it, because I really think boys need to learn about them. And so she can take the stance with her sons of, hey, this isn't something you're going to have, because this doesn't happen in the boy's body, but I want you to understand how periods work. And we're going to watch this video from Sex Ever Claimed, or, I want to tell you a little bit about that. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I just want you to understand it, because it's so beautiful when boys can be helpful in that. Like, there was a viral video a while back of a boy who, I think it was a girl talking about her experience, but she got her period like on the bus, didn't know, and it was showing. And a boy literally like somehow found a pad for her, a tampon, and like gave her it in middle school. Like, that's just so sweet and precious. And it might have even been a class. I could be messing up the story, but it was something like that, where a boy stepped up, a young boy, and he helped her. And you have to know that those parents were probably telling him
A+.
He has sisters, or like they were really communicating to him about it, and even making sure they understand what a tampon and a pad is, so they're not like weirded out and grossed out by it, but rather they know, oh no, this is something they need, that they use, and this is how the body works, and we wouldn't be here if it weren't for periods. Like, really bring up how great periods are for the reproduction of life. Yeah, they have symptomatic feelings that stink, but like, they are a natural part of life, and you wouldn't be here without them. So affirm women's bodies and how they work, because
Yeah.
it's amazing and that's how God made us.
I love it. I was at Target the other day, and there was a mom that was buying tampons or something like that. And dad was pushing the cart, and the daughter was probably, I don't know, like 2 or 3. She's like, "Oh, what's that?" And he goes, "Oh," he's like, those are what moms use for their period. And I don't remember what she else asked, but he's like, "Yeah, those are for mom." Like, it was just this sweet, like,
Straightforward.
10-second
Yeah.
little moment. And I felt so good to hear dad not be weird, not, avoid the questions, but, "Oh, yeah, those are for mom for a period." And it was just like so sweet.
Exactly.
I loved it.
I
So
love it.
I do want to transition into talking a little bit about your curriculum and how that can serve parents. But is there anything, as far as before we shift into curriculum conversation, that you're like, I would love parents to know, right? There's so many questions we didn't get a chance, to get to today, but what's the one big thing that you want parents to know as they are asking questions or engaging conversations around sex with their kids?
I want parents to know that this is their God-given responsibility as part of their child's discipleship. This is not something to avoid. It is not something to primarily focus on your own discomfort or even their discomfort. It is an opportunity for you to grow in relationship with your children and for them to grow in their knowledge of who their creator is. The sex talk has been demonized for too long, and it's been shut down. And I actually think that is a work of the ultimate demon. Like, I think that's a work of Satan, because he wants to tear down God's people. He wants to lie to us, as he has since the beginning of time. He wants to twist truth. He wants to kind of own our sexuality and our narrative of our sexuality. And that is hellacious. Like, that is wrong. God created sexuality. He created our bodies. He created sex. He created reproduction. He created us. And he loves and cares for us. And he did it, and he did all of this intentionally and beautifully. And yes, we live in a sinful world. And so it's very marred, all of those things. But shoot, if you're not reclaiming the narrative, then who is? I mean, this is yours. And that's really what God told me back in grad school when I was teaching. This is mine. Why are you so afraid to talk about it? And that was a big 180 for me of ownership of this conversation. And I show you how you can do that in my curriculum, yes, and social media. But the main thing is that you need to know you can own it. Like, you can, even if your experience was like mine, where you had no conversation about anything ever once, like ever. It's still yours because it's the Lord's, and the Lord gives us this. It is a blessing. And so if you can switch your framework through prayer, through scripture research, through, fellowship with others, through talking to your spouse, through journaling, through reflection, if you can switch your framework as an adult to, wow, this is a beautiful opportunity I have with my kids, you will approach it that way. And that will be really good for your kids.
Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. So our listeners are ready to have more support. They're interested in curriculum. What are they going to find when they check out Sex Ed Reclaimed curriculum?
So they are going to find 4 different packages for families and similar packages for schools and large groups. So these packages are age-based, like I said earlier, 3 to 6-year-olds, 7 to 10-year-olds, 11 to 13-year-olds, and 14 to 18-year-olds. So it's all age-appropriate material. You don't have to start at the beginning. You just start at whatever age your kid or student is. And they will learn information for that stage of life at a developmentally appropriate place. They will get a ton of video content from me teaching all the lessons I've ever taught, and a workbook. They'll get parent resources. I have videos in each curriculum which discuss for parents how to handle certain things. Like, what do I do if I walk in on my kid using porn? How do I respond? And so these are researched, scientifically based, but biblically ingrained material for kids, specifically for kids. Like I said, parents get some stuff in there
very
too.
different. Like, I think that's really important, that this is content that is safe for your children to watch and learn and have conversations. That, yes, parents, but this is not a parents have to do it all by yourself. You are partnering with parents to help have the conversations that may feel awkward or uncomfortable to support them in that way, which I love.
Yeah, exactly. It's really for kids to watch, but naturally what's going to happen, and my favorite testimonials that I get back are the ones that say, this started the conversation in my home. Like, I didn't really know how to do this, or I did it kind of poorly with my older two, but I have two youngers and we've started, and it just naturally makes you as the parent look like the expert because you're the one playing this information for them. And they don't know me personally. And so I'm this like medium, like I'm in the middle and can communicate the message, and they have no experience with me, which is actually kind of good for this topic.
Yep.
They don't know me personally, but the reflection goes back to the parent and all the questions go back to them, and you could go step by step with them from there. And it starts the conversation in your own homes, but information coming from an expert has taught this many times.
Love it. Amazing. And you're really kind. You gave us a 30% off for listeners, which I will make sure that code is in the show notes. So grateful for that, so that parents can go and equip. And they can buy full curriculum, but they also can buy just specific ages that they need, correct too?
Totally. Like I said, I have some parents whose two older kids are already out of the house. They have one younger, and so they're just going to get the one for her. I have parents who buy the whole thing because they maybe have 7 or 8 kids. Yeah. But the great thing is you keep it forever. Like, it never expires. There's no yearly membership fee or something like that. You just get the content, you have it forever. And anything I add, you just get for free. Like, you just have that there. So it's a really good deal in the sense that, let's say you only have very little kids. You get the 3 to 6 curriculum. You have that for all the following kids with updated information as time goes on.
Amazing, amazing. All right. So if our friends want to connect with you online, where can they find you?
So Sex Ed Reclaimed is my Instagram and my TikTok and Facebook. And then Kristen Miele is my LinkedIn, but primarily sexedreclaimed.com is the website where they can find free samples, free ebooks, book resources I recommend. There's so many great books on adult and human sexuality from a Christian perspective. And there's also great kids books. And I don't just recommend a book as sex ed, like that's not a complete sex ed, but there's books that hit on certain topics for kids that could be helpful in aiding your journey. And I have all of that on my website.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Kristen, so grateful for you to hang out with our Recover Your Life crew today, and looking forward to the conversations that get to change generations because of the resources that you have brought into the world so beautifully. So thank you for all the hours behind the scenes that we'll never see that get to change our families' conversations around sex.
Thank you, Bridgett. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm so glad you could join us for today's conversation. Be sure to check out your show notes to learn more about today's guest, how you can connect with them, and other resources they have to support you in your journey to living the life you long for. If you're interested in booking a coaching session with me, you can book your free discovery call today by using the link in our show notes. Friend, your story is so worth sharing, and I hope that today you feel a little bit more supported in navigating conversations about faith, sexuality, and relationships. I would love to partner with you on this journey, so if there's anything you need from me, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. I can't wait to see you next time on the Recover Your Life podcast.